Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I have a fabulous guest with me today. What a story he has to share with us. His name is Edward Miskie. He is an actor, writer, producer, singer, composer, and dot connector. He is also the sole survivor of a rare non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and author of the 10-year Cancer Survivorship Anniversary Edition of the book Cancer, Musical Theater, and Other Chronic Illnesses. It has been described as a musical theater fever dream fueled by chemo, alcohol, sex, and heartbreak. What else could there be? So, Edward, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Glad to be here.
What an intro and what a story you have to share.
Yeah, it's quite the journey, right? And it gets wilder as I start to talk to people about it more. And I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. I totally forgot about that. And it's just like, whew, how am I here?
Well, and even when you do retell the story over and over, do you sometimes look around and say, who was that? Who did that happen to?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that I talk about a lot is identity pieces and how you just become a totally different human after something like that happens. And it doesn't have to be cancer specific, but any kind of major trauma, whether it be like a big car accident or a death in the family or whatever, like you change. And, you know, the size of the event tends to dictate the size of the change and the more different of a person that you become.
Yeah, I went through a pretty significant trauma, which is how I got involved in martial arts. And my therapist kept saying, you're different now. You're different now. Things have changed. You're a different person and you're changed. And it was like, I don't want to change. I like the way I was before.
Well, I didn't.
Oh, well, okay. So tell us, just tell us a little bit. You can start with your career, how you got into acting and singing and that, or you can start at the time that you were diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to leave it up to you.
Sure. I mean, the career thing is kind of, textbook. I was a kid in a music family, it was all around me. And it just kind of was one of those things that felt like a natural transition into something like that. I saw my first Broadway show at 14 and was like, oh my God, people do this and for money. And like, so is that what I want to do? And that was kind of when I got bit by the bug, and that ended up being a several decade pursuit. But that they kind of coincide with each other, right? I mean, I was doing a show when I was diagnosed. I was out in Reno at a casino doing a production of Hairspray, and shortly before we left for that, after we were rehearsing in the city, I found a lump under my arm and was misdiagnosed by my doctor. And I went out to Reno, and during the run of this show, which was 18 weeks, this lump under my arm turned into like this grapefruit sized thing.
Oh my
And
God.
It became very evident about halfway through that contract that something was up and I needed to get my ass back to the city and figure it out. So, that was kind of like how the two of those, the twain shall meet, and it was scary. It was weird. I write about how I was on stage one night and there was a piece where my arm goes up and that's where it was. And I felt this ripping. And I thought that it was like something happened, that something really serious has happened. But really all it was I could feel it growing and it was pulling on the tendons in my arm. And I had like stretch marks on my side from it happening. And it happened very quickly. And it was a very definitive moment on stage where I was like, what just happened?
Oh my God. But the show did go on. You continued the performance.
I was the pro, so the show kept going, but
Wow,
maybe not these days I would do that.
I can't believe you actually had stretch marks from it. It was growing that fast.
Oh yeah, they're still there. I mean, they're not like stretched out, but they're like, how when stretch marks go away because they're not stretching anymore. But you can still see them. They're still there. There's a lot of them.
Wow. So you go back to New York, which is where you're from, right?
Correct.
And to get it checked out. And were they able to get you in right away, or did you have to sit there and wait a couple of weeks for an appointment?
I had called my doctor ahead of time, and he already knew what was going on. So all I really needed to do was get something on the books for when I was back. So I got back and I think I had an appointment with him like 2 days later. And that result, he didn't know what it was. He didn't know what was going on. So he referred me somewhere else for a biopsy. And then when that came back, it was like, okay, this is what this is. And then I think maybe 5 days later, I was checked in for chemo.
Oh my God. Okay. So how old were you at the time?
25. Like just turned 25.
Oh, well, happy birthday, right?
Right.
Oh man. So you said it's a very rare form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I mean, how rare is it? What's the name of it, if you can remember?
Sure.
And what
So
is the prognosis? Obviously, it's not good.
no, it's not good. It was very peculiar. There was no reason why I should have had this with the history of this type of cancer. It's a rare and large B cell Burkitt's like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Straight Burkitt's cancer is typically found in children under a certain age in Africa. And like I was not under that age and I was not in Africa. And so there was a lot of confusion as to why the hell I had this. And the case numbers, I believe, were somewhere like it was like under 1,200 cases were reported worldwide. And no, I didn't know this until later, but no one who has had this type of cancer has lived or has lived without a recurrence. And so I have done both of those things. And that is why I was at my 5-year mark, my oncologist told me I was a sole survivor. And I was kind of like, I didn't need to know that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Grateful. Cool. But like,
Yeah.
because that's scary. If it comes back, unless there's some major medical breakthrough, like I'm the baseline case and that doesn't feel good. Like that sucks.
Yeah, I can imagine so, but at least you didn't know that ahead of time. They didn't tell you.
I am so glad I didn't know this ahead of time. I knew that it was rare. I knew that there were very few cases reported worldwide. And my first hospital had very little idea of what to do. They were very like figuring it out on the fly. And so after a couple, yeah, that didn't feel good. I speak about them extensively and anonymously in the book. Not trying to get sued here. But like the prognosis was really bad. I mean, they wanted me to do 6 rounds of chemo. We only did 4 because none of them worked. And then we switched over to radiation, 30 days of radiation every day for 30 days. And that seemed to work. It destroyed my skin. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen radiated skin, but it looks like a charred steak. It's not pretty.
I've heard. I haven't seen it. I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, that's a quick Google search that I would not recommend. But like it, the radiation worked. The tumor shrank down and it didn't come back, and there was a lot of hope around that. And then they wanted me to do this whole like stem cell transplant where someone else was my donor, and they were pushing for that. And I was like, I was 25 and at the peak of my health, and like there was no reason why I couldn't have been my own donor. And they kept pushing for me not to be my own donor, which made me so wildly uncomfortable. And I had a really hard time collecting to be my own donor. And then later found out that that was because they had me on an antibiotic that like screwed up my blood count. So of course I was having a hard time collecting. And I left that hospital and I went to Sloan Kettering for a second opinion, much to their, pushback. They didn't want me to go get a second opinion somewhere else because cancer is profitable. And
you didn't say that out loud.
I'll say it out loud until the cows come home. It's the sad truth of this whole situation. And I find it really peculiar, at least that has not come across my radar. And to be fair, I'm not really looking for it, but there was an article that came out, I think last year from Sloan Kettering, where they had 18 different people with 18 different types of cancer, and each of them received this one particular type of treatment, and every single one of them had their cancer cleared. And so that was kind of the beginnings of curing cancer, as it were. But, I don't know if that'll ever go mainstream because it won't make people money.
Well, it's actually my sensei he reads a lot and does a lot of research. He's also an acupuncturist. So I think it was a physician, maybe it was in the 40s, the 30s or 40s, it was quite a long time ago, who had studied cancer and treatments and blah, 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 and actually had come across, like a cure of some sort. And died suddenly under like really suspicious circumstances. And yeah, I know it's just one of those things, but yeah, because I mean, imagine if you could do something,
Suspicious.
something so simple to cure cancer and get rid of it. I mean, yeah.
I have yeah, for those who are just listening and can't see my face, I'm making that face.
Okay. And if you are listening and you can't see the face, go to YouTube because the video is on YouTube. So you can see Edward's face.
Yes, like
And
and
even if you
subscribe.
don't see it, his voice is very expressive as well as his expression. So
Thank you.
it's
Yeah,
worth
no,
seeing.
it's crazy how, like, my medical bills at the end, had I not had an insurance situation, would have been multiple millions. I think it would have been close to 2 million. I
Jeez.
mean, I had one stay that was, I think, 12 days, that was $750,000. I had my stem cell transplant, which was 21 days, that was 1.7. So, and that was only two things that happened in the 10 months that I was in treatment.
Oh my God.
So,
Yeah, it
yikes.
does make you wonder, huh? And just so you
Sure
know,
does.
I am a medical person, or let's say recovering. 40 years in the medical field. I was a respiratory therapist for almost 20 years before I got my master's in physical therapy. It's like, why did I do that? That was stupid. But yeah, I mean, I've seen such an incredible change, even from when I started in the late 70s and went through my career, of how the focus would change from patient care to income.
Yeah. I'm yeah. I'm so curious of, like, how that felt and looked like during that period of time, because now it's so obviously about
Yeah.
income
Yeah.
that it's like, we've almost become numb to it.
It was subtle at first, but you could definitely tell. It's like, why are they ordering all these tests? And then why are so many different physicians reading them and interpreting them, when some of them, like arterial blood gases, I could do for free? And it was like, huh. And just as, it was just very interesting. And I did interview a physician who is in the process of retiring. She's in New York City herself. And she turned from, doing medicine to, she's written a couple of books. And her take was just fascinating, because she wrote a book on the other end of the stethoscope about what physicians are going through now because of so much pressure being put on them. So I can't remember her name is Deborah E. Blaine. So for those of you listening, I think it's episode 206. But it's fascinating to hear a physician talk like that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'll leave it at the fact that the Food and Drug Administration are connected. That has
Mm-hmm.
always given me pause, and I think it's become a little bit less hidden now that the food that makes you sick is then medicated by the drugs that make you sick. So it's like, can we get some kind of, like,
I
integrity
know.
in this piece, please?
And how blatant they are, because I'm sure you've seen the new food pyramid.
I have not, no.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, you should really look
No.
that up. It's fascinating, because is it Fruit Loops and Cocoa Puffs are like the bottom tier,
Oh God.
and steak and chicken are like the very top tier of things that you should not eat, because the Fruit Loops and the Cocoa Puffs are healthier for you. I mean, how stupid did they think
There
we are?
there is no world. I just spent 3 weeks in Europe in the fall. And if you look at a picture of me from day one when I
Mhm.
arrived, and then you look at a picture of me of day like 20 after I had been there, like, you can see it in my face that, like, I have melted because I wasn't eating food that we have here. And this is obviously, like, a much longer conversation, maybe for a different podcast, I'm not
Yes.
sure, but, like, but it does tie in, I mean, I had a nutritionist when I left the hospital that was telling me what I can and cannot eat, and I became like a label reader in grocery
Hmm.
stores, and I was like looking for particular things that
Hmm.
I should not have. And there were certain preservatives that they were like, do not eat anything with this in at this time because your immune system is not blah blah blah.
Hmm.
And it was like, well, if I shouldn't eat this when I have no immune system, why is it okay to eat when I do have one?
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of like really, gave pause on like what the hell is in the food. And then having been to Europe and back and being like, why are these things that we eat here illegal in Mexico, Canada, Europe, etc.?
And why does the
So,
food taste better?
well, I'll give you 3 guesses.
Yeah, well, let's not even go there. Okay, so
Right.
now you go through all of this treatment, and now you are declared cancer-free. So life is good now. You can go back to how things were before. Yeah, how'd that work out?
Well, that's actually a really big misconception that I talk a lot about. Life does
Mm-hmm,
not go back to anything, and
mm-hmm,
it is not an exciting period of time. It is not thrilling, and they're like, yeah, okay, you have a moment to celebrate, like, yay, I'm not going to die. But like what you have to realize, and one of the reasons I wrote this book is because when you're told you don't have cancer anymore, you don't have a life to go back to.
right.
Like everything that you knew,
Mm-hmm,
from like career to relationships to friends and everything else, has changed or is gone. I had
mm-hmm,
a boyfriend when I went into the hospital. I did
mm-hmm.
not have one when I came out. I had a group of close friends when I went into the hospital, and I did not have one when I came out. I still had a group of friends, but there were some that had gone away and were
Right.
not coming back that I still have not spoken to or have spoken to me to this day, 10 years later. So
Wow.
like there is this, and it's to no one's fault. I mean, it's how it's portrayed, and it's, I think it's very American to just like put on a smile and be like, everything's fine now. But like,
Mm-hmm,
it was harder than being a
mm-hmm,
patient. And I say that with the understanding that when you're a patient, you have a schedule and people are pulling you in
mm-hmm,
all directions and like, be here, do this, don't do that, and you
mm-hmm,
have structure. And
mm-hmm.
then when it's over, it's like, okay, you get to go figure out this structure now, but like you're still not fully recovered, and like
Right.
you have all this like PTSD and like this minefield going on in your head that like is
Right.
wild. I just had with my job, I work in like client attraction and sales and online
Mm-hmm.
marketing and coaches and stuff like that. And we were doing like a work meditation today, and I had this big breakthrough realization horror show that happened where we were talking about resistances and revisiting a memory where we had a similar feeling to where we were right now. And without whatever my brain did, it took me right back to the first day that I was in the hospital, that I was checked in and didn't know what was
Wow.
going to happen. I didn't know what the plan for the day was. I had absolutely zero control. And I was like, I'm having a panic attack right now. Because
Mm-hmm.
like I was having a hard time controlling my breathing and just kind of like calming. I was sweaty and just sitting, like, which is nothing new. I'm always sweaty, but like, I was just kind of sitting there like thinking about this day and just like freaking out. It freaked me out so bad. And that was today. Like that was today. Year of
Wow.
our Lord 2023. Like, it's crazy. If you don't, I don't think I consciously dealt with a lot of the things that I
Mm-hmm.
had been going through.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I did because I felt okay, but I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that was just me pushing down the things I needed help with to just get through the day, because there's no
Right.
schedule. You don't have like, get up, do this,
Mm-hmm.
go see a therapist, eat this, do that. That's
Mm-hmm.
gone. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had a nutritionist, sure, but that had an expiration date on it. The insurance
Right.
wouldn't cover it past a certain point. And once you hit the cancer-free part, that's it. It's hard. You have to figure it out. And
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to figure a lot of it out with bourbon and pizza and hot wings. Which was fun at the time in the short
Uh-huh.
term. But so it's tough. It's a weird place to be in,
Mm-hmm.
like, and like we were talking about earlier, the person you were before like is not there anymore. And thankfully in my case, the person I was before was kind of a dick, so like I was good
Yeah.
with leaving him behind.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're really at a loss, because you're like, okay,
Right.
well, what do I do now? And I think in the short term, the thought is, oh no, that's so scary. But the real version of that is like, this is great. I have a
Mm-hmm.
chance to very literally start over. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like bare bones. You have no body left. Your brain is like foggy from all the chemo, and like everything else is gone. So if you don't want to go back to the career you had before, you don't have to. You know, if you don't want to go back to the friends you had before, you don't have to. You know, and it's kind of empowering. I wish I would have felt that way a little bit more during that period of time, because the empowerment of being able to just do whatever and shape yourself into a person that you want to be from nothing is kind of wonderful. And I wish I had more of that framework when I was first coming out of the hospital.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very empowering, and it's wonderful and liberating to be able to start over and, you know, really kind of be who you were meant to be. But it's also terrifying.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
as
hello.
in life isn't hard enough, you know?
Exactly. I mean, and looking in the mirror and you see, it's like you don't even recognize yourself, even though, you know, when I went through what I went through, I did change physically, well, quite a bit, because I'd lost a lot of weight. But I would just look in the mirror and it's like, who are you? And it was just really, really weird, and just trying to get back into some sort of normalcy.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you crave, right? You need a
Right.
baseline or something to keep your feet on. And, you know, especially when you go from being like this, like gorgeous young 25-year-old human to like someone who very much looks like they've gone through cancer and back, you know, that messes with you too. And that plays into body dysmorphia and like, I'm sure
Self-image.
some self-image, and I'm sure some other kind of like mental health technical term that I can't pull out right now, but it's just like, it's so wild, like looking in the mirror and knowing that that's you and not recognizing them, like
Right.
physically. Like you can have that moment where you've done something or something has changed in your life, and you can look in the mirror and like, I don't recognize this person I've become. But when it's, I don't recognize the person that I look like, that is scary.
I got to the point where I couldn't, I mean, I'm a ballet dancer, you know, I still take ballet classes even to this day, but I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. And if you've ever been in a ballet studio, you know, there are mirrors everywhere. And of course, everybody's fighting and elbowing to get their space so they can see themselves. And I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. And I remember one of my ballet teachers just yelling at me because she says, you know, you have crazy eyes. And I'm like, oh, well, thanks a lot, you know.
Lord. Well, I mean, I just had an interview I did a while back come out about eating disorders and the entertainment industry. And, you know, that was a lot of the conversation, but I kind of have it in the opposite direction where like I was like in shape and fit and small, even though I didn't think I was. And then going into cancer and getting smaller, but bloatier and full of hormones and weird and, you know, whatever. And then coming out of that and just like completely peaking as far as like I'm concerned, the way that I looked. And now being in my 30s and looking back at that and comparing the way that I look now to the way that I looked when I came out of cancer treatment and being like, that's great. I want to look like that. Like, what mental illness is that? And then on top of that, the things that people said to me during that period of time where I was in recovery, like very short order, my body was healing, you know, things were moving around. And people were like, oh my God, you look great. You've never looked better. Cancer suits you. Oh my God. And it was like, okay. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. But really, it was like, Jesus, if this is the standard, why am I like adhering to this?
Well,
And
and
putting
even
value in it, you know?
I was thinking even back when you were talking about, you know, losing friends and all that stuff, when you're declared now cancer free and yay, go on, live your life and be happy and all that kind of stuff. To me, it's some of the things that people will say to you, like, oh, well, you know, you should count your blessings because, you know, yeah, you went through cancer, now you survived. Or, hey, you're one of the lucky ones. And it's like, you don't really feel very lucky.
No,
And
no.
it's
And
almost like,
it's so weird that that's like language that surrounds traumatic things, right?
yeah,
Like, oh, it could be worse. Like,
yeah.
okay, yeah, it could have been, but like, we're not talking about that.
Yeah, we had a horrible fire here. It was around last Christmas up in Boulder, the Boulder County area in Colorado, and it wiped out an entire neighborhood. It actually wiped out an entire little community. And, you know, so everybody just lost their homes. And a lot of people would say, Well, you're lucky. At least you're alive. And it's like, well, yeah, at least I'm alive, but I've lost every single thing I own. And it's almost like it's dismissing the experience or marginalizing the experience that, the person went through.
Yeah, well,
And
I mean, because everyone wants to be, I think there's like a need there of the people who say that, where it's like, they don't want to acknowledge someone else's feelings or
Mhm,
someone else's situation because they want to be the victim. And so it's
mhm.
like, well, it could be worse because this happened to me. Or, like
Yeah.
there's some kind of like weird, I need to feel a particular way kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that person's experience down or negate that person's experience
Yeah.
because, well, it's that whole like there's starving children in China or Africa, or pick a
Right.
continent that your parents chose back in the
Right.
day.
Yeah. So you have to
You
clean your
know,
plate.
right, which is, talk about eating disorders. It's just kind of, it's such a weird mentality of wanting to be a victim. Why do we want to be victims? It's such a human thing. I don't understand it. Stop it. Everyone
Yeah.
stop being victims.
Stop being victims. Yeah. Take some martial arts, learn how to beat people up. Oh, that makes you feel you're never a victim again.
Right, or just like yourself, which is obviously easier
Exactly.
said than done, but like like maybe
Well,
let's
it
work
is
towards
easier
that.
said than done. And we're
Of
not
course.
taught to like ourselves.
No, we're not. Not at all.
Hmm.
And that's, I again that goes back to the whole like being told you're cancer free, you get to live, rebuild your life the way you want it to. I could have chosen to be like, well, I'm gonna like myself now, but I didn't. And I chose to be like, you're a hideous garbage monster and you need to fix your face. Like, it was like it was stuff like that.
Hmm.
Why do we do that?
Well, yeah, but even with that, you want to like yourself more. You want to look in the mirror and like what you see, and you can do that, but it's a process. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight.
No, and it's also, chasing the carrot, like, oh, if
Right.
if I just had one more ab, maybe I would like myself. Or, oh, maybe if my hair was just a little bit longer, I would like myself. And then you just
Yeah.
chase this thing that just it's never going to get better.
Right.
Because then maybe you get that ab and maybe your hair grows a little bit more and then you're going to find something else.
Yep. Yep. Also, always looking for the fault. So I want to talk a little about your book, because I think the whole idea of it is fascinating. I love your website. I love the picture of you, and the cover of the book is just awesome. I mean, just looking
Thank
at the
you.
cover kind of says it all. And your personality definitely comes through. So,
Thank you.
bravo. That's really good. But it's almost like I think you created a new genre, because it's a new genre. When I was taking
Thank
the
you.
notes for the show, it's like, wow, this is a new genre that Edward created, and it is funny as cancer can be. Funny as cancer can be fantasy nonfiction. So I love the
Yes.
fantasy nonfiction, putting that together, and especially funny as cancer can be, because of course there's nothing funny about cancer, but some of the things that I read, describing the book and the description of the book, and it just, on your profile, was pretty darn funny.
Well, thank you. I certainly tried. um yeah, I mean, I think I've decided that like the full genre is actually fantasy, nonfiction, musical theater, fever dream, autobiographical adjacent book, or insert
Memoir or
descriptor here,
whatever. Yeah.
memoir. Sure, because it's like sort of a memoir but it's not, and it's kind of an autobiography but it's not. Like
Uh-huh.
it doesn't fit anywhere.
And it's kind of a fantasy, but it's not.
Right, like it's heightened reality. I tell people, like, when I wrote this, the movie musical of Chicago,
Yes.
LOL Chicago, the
Yeah.
cover, um the the lens in which I was writing this book was through the director, Rob Ashford,
Okay.
Rob Marshall. Oh my God, now I'm forgetting the director. It's either Rob Marshall or I think it's Rob Marshall. It's Rob Marshall.
Okay.
And like how that movie goes from like their reality and all of a sudden it's like into fantasy land.
Uh-huh.
Like that was the lens I was writing this book through. So you're going through, and then all of a sudden like this character pops up that's like not supposed to be there but is supposed to be there, and you're like not sure if you're hallucinating. And
Uh-huh.
the worse the cancer gets, the more heightened the reality becomes.
Oh.
So that's kind of like the fantasy part of it
Uh-huh.
/ musical theater fever dream.
Well, and I love the way that you put your background and integrated your incredible background into this, and it's a production. I mean, it's more than just a book, it's a production.
Well, I mean, little not known much secret is that I'm actually working on turning it into a TV show that'll be musical. So it'll be very much like Zoe's Extended Playlist, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I guess components of Glee maybe, but not that. But yeah, it's being worked on right now. Like I have the script already
Yeah.
started and cranking and some music written for it,
Yeah.
and I'm excited about it. It's going to be a production.
Yes, I did see that on your profile. And obviously, it's not a little known fact now because you're telling people about it. So it's not a
Right.
secret. And I'm really excited about that. Have you ever seen the movie All That Jazz?
No,
I
I don't
think
think so.
I think it came out in the early 90s, maybe the late 80s, and it was kind of like a take on Bob Fosse's life, and I think he was a contributor. So it was a Broadway, production that they were putting together, and apparently the who played the lead, Roy Schreider, the guy who was the lead in Jaws.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
okay,
That
but it
that
was
sounds right though.
it's the main character, and of course, if you watch the movie, it's part of it's a little bit cheesy because it's like in the 80s or whatever, but the storyline is just so good because it focuses on this director who's really working 16 hours a day. He's doing, he's drinking a lot, he's smoking a lot, he's doing drugs, he's putting in the Visine every morning, and it's like, it's showtime. And he goes, so it's really interesting. And then there's another part of it that's a little bit, what's going on here? Is this a fantasy world? Or so I highly recommend it. And the dancing is really incredible.
I will. I'll have to use that for some inspo down the road.
Hmm. So when you do have this production of the book, are you going to let us know?
Oh my God, absolutely. You will not get rid of me. Like
Oh, good.
I'm going hard on this. Like I'm excited about it. The vision we have for it is really cool. My
Uh-huh.
producing partner and I are like really gangbusters about this. And it's just a matter of finishing the script, which hopefully I will have done before summer. And then we kind
Uh-huh.
of move into phase 2 of, being in pre-pro and figuring out funding and where all that's coming from, and, having a plan. So I don't have a deadline for it yet, but I'm hoping within the next year we'll be seeing some stuff on screen.
Will you be performing in it?
That's the plan. It's gonna take some mental gymnastics for me, because in my head the character in the book is 25 because I was 25, and
Right.
obviously I am very much not 25.
Oh,
But then
please.
I know, but it never really mentions much in the book about being 25, really. I
Right.
mean, the only story that's really kind of age specific, and again, with an adaptation you can do whatever you want, there's an excerpt about freezing sperm, because chemo makes you sterile, right?
Right.
So like I was about to go into a chemo appointment. I was in waiting, and my oncologist came out and was like, "Hey, did you ever want to have kids?" And I was like, I'd never thought about it really in a serious way. And she's like, "Okay, well, the next round of chemo is going to kind of like make that not a possibility. So we need to have you decide if you would like to make that happen, and freeze anything."
Uh-huh.
But the gag is that insurance doesn't cover it because it's vanity. Uh, you only have 5 years for it to be viable. And at the time, it was $1,200 a year. And so, with that in mind, I would have either frivolously paid like seven, I don't know how many thousands of dollars, like just shy of 10, I'm assuming.
Right.
No, that's wrong. I can't do math. Don't ask me to do math. Um, but I would have paid several $1,000s, and or I would have a 6-year-old right now. And
Oh my
like
God.
that's horrendous to ask someone who's 25 and about to like just be completely rendered sterile. So
Oh God.
there's a whole chapter in the book that talks about that appointment and the conversation I had with the doctor, and it goes off into this fantasy world about me having a kid and the life I'm living at however many years down the road. And then just like coming crashing down at the end of it and being like, this isn't real and this isn't going to happen. And so I decided to not do it.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's so much to have to process.
in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, hello. Could they have maybe mentioned this a little bit sooner?
Right. Well, and that's another, going back to the medical situation, like that's another thing that is just so lacking in, at least in my experience with the onboarding of bringing you into a scenario like this. There were so many things that I just wasn't told, that I
Uh-huh.
didn't know. Like that was one of them. The first day that I was there, I was going into surgery and I was like, surgery for what? And like they didn't tell me that I was going to have a port put in. Like no one mentioned that. I found out as it was happening. Like I was like, why am I
So you didn't
here?
have to sign a release form or sign a consent?
I mean, I'm sure I did, but like you're not in a headspace for that.
Right.
Like you
Right.
needed articulated it to you, because that's not right. Reading the fine print is not something that you're interested in doing at that moment. Like you have bigger things to worry about.
So I'm guessing you did not have a patient advocate, somebody who could speak for you. I mean, I'm kind of guessing that your boyfriend would have been an option, but apparently,
He wasn't an option for anything.
uh,
My mom was my
yeah.
patient advocate. She works in medical and she was amazing.
Okay.
Patient advocate as far as like delegation from the hospital, no.
Yeah. Okay.
Not until I got to Sloan Kettering, and there was some bumps in the road with that too. That in the long run was not their fault, but it just was circumstantial.
Mhm.
Won't go into it, but whatever. But for the most part, my mom was there as an advocate because she knew what she was doing. She had like caught a couple instances where like the chemo was wrong and the dosage was wrong, and like it was because she used to mix chemo, so like she's
Oh,
acutely
wow.
aware of how this goes down. And so thank God for her, because a couple things would have been missed.
Yeah, and we might not be having this conversation.
That's quite a possibility. So
Jeez. Okay, and I actually have this written down in my notes because I was afraid that I was going to forget it. So during this time that you went, okay, from your diagnosis to cancer to being completely cancer free, you had been, and you already touched on some of these things, but not the final one, that you were broken up with, you lost your best friend, you missed career opportunities while losing your hair, your body, your sense of identity, and planning your own funeral.
yeah. Yeah. Things were bad. We didn't know how bad they were going to get. And there was a discussion I had with my oncologist at the first hospital, um, where I had asked for a meeting with her.
Uh-huh.
And she met me in this big atrium that was in the hospital, and I had coffee, and while I'm sitting there having coffee, this fucking theater calls me and asks me to like do a summer stock, and I can't.
Oh
So that's
God.
annoying.
Well,
But
not only that, it's kind of like a knife through your gut.
yeah, well, and God love them. They didn't ask why. They just said that they assumed that I was already booked, and so they were sorry to hear it, but thank you so much. And I was like, yeah, I'm booked, all right.
Yeah. It's not the booking I
um,
was looking for, but yeah,
right,
I'm
right,
booked.
right. This I could have done without this contract, but yeah. So I mean, I had this conversation with her about the severity of the situation, and it was the first time that I kind of, and I still have the text messages from her saved prior to this meeting, that was basically just like, this isn't going as well as we thought it would. We aren't really sure what to do. We're going to try some other things and see what happens.
Oh my God.
And it was like, great, cool, excellent. So yeah, I mean, it got bad, and it was just kind of like I should write down what I want or something, you know. And it was right around this was right around the time that those like, I don't even know what they're called anymore. They were like this underground pod that you're put in with tree seeds, and then you like fertilize and turn into a tree.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, that's kind of cool. I want to do that, but that's expensive. Like that's an expensive venture. But being cremated is also expensive and terrible for the environment. And being buried in a wood box is also terrible for the environment and very expensive. So it was kind of like rock on a hard place. Like, what do I do? And part of me wanted to be cremated so my parents could have like a thing,
Uh-huh.
like an urn of some kind, and we'd make it sparkly and decorative and all
Of
those things.
course.
But
Yes.
obviously, but But yeah, I mean, there was definitely discussion. I didn't want any kind of church anything. I wanted like a memorial at best with absolutely no church music whatsoever. I wanted it to be fun. I did not want black. I didn't want anyone to be wearing black. You know, make it a
And
party.
did you talk about this with your parents or with your mom?
A little bit, yeah. I let them know that I was doing it.
Okay.
And
Were they freaking out, or were they just...
Oh my God, my parents are like absolutely amazing people. Keeping in mind that my little sister was going through rehab at the same time. She had gone into rehab the year before. I had cancer the year after.
Oh God.
She's 11 or 12 years sober of everything, and I'm 10 years cancer free. So my parents, like, if they were going to get divorced, it would have happened. Like, they've been together since high school. Like, that was the stress test. They're fine.
Jeez.
But they were just cool as a cucumber. You know, I know that they weren't, but they were completely level for the most part. You know, my dad
for
tends to
you.
be. Oh my God, absolutely. And it was part of that was my doing. There was no crying aloud in the room. You know, I kind of made it very clear that I wanted Disney World and happiness and sparkles, and you know, that's what I got, unless I initiated the not sparkles, not Disney World, all of that. But my dad tends to be a little bit more forthright with his feelings. And so there were a couple times where I was like, Dad, stop it. Keep it together.
God.
But they were really amazing. They were able to utilize the FMLA with their work situations, respective work situations at the time, and they took turns coming to New York and being able
Where
to
do they live?
They're in Pennsylvania. They're not far.
Oh, really?
You know, it was
Where?
like a right outside of like the Hershey, Lancaster area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Farmland, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Pennsylvania.
Oh,
the other
where?
side. Western Pennsylvania. Small steel town right outside of Pittsburgh, which is why I live here in Denver.
Oh, where?
It's just about 25 miles.
Like Greensboro or something like that?
It's a town called Aliquippa.
Okay, I don't know that one.
Yeah, when I say small steel town, I really mean it. But it's where Mike Ditka was from.
Okay.
He went to high school with my uncle. They were in the same class. Tony Dorsett is actually from our hometown, but he went to a different high school. Henry Mancini. We had a surgeon general, which is really amazing that we did have some incredible people come out of Aliquippa.
Yeah, I mean, Henry Mancini. Oh, my Lord.
My father, who was an immigrant, actually, from Eastern Europe, and they were living in this part of town that's actually called West Aliquippa, and he and his buddies used to make fun of this geeky little kid who couldn't play ball with them because he was always inside practicing his piano or the trumpet or blah blah, the clarinet, and he was always practicing music. And the kids, my husband or my father and his buddies felt so sorry for this kid. Well, about 20 years later, they didn't feel sorry for him anymore. That was Henry Mancini.
Nope, Moon River. Take that.
Moon River. And that's what he actually wrote Moon River. It was about the Ohio River because they lived, right on the Ohio River.
Right by it, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Well, and it was one of those rare evenings or rare nights that the river actually looked pretty because God knows they put a lot of stuff in that river.
Oh, I'm sure they did. Well, I hate to be this person, but I think I might be able to one-up you a little bit on this.
Oh, go ahead.
So I did not know them at all. I know people who did, but the same school district that my parents went to, Taylor Swift went to.
Whoa, you definitely one-upped me.
I know that she likes to pretend that she's from Tennessee. She is not. She is from Pennsylvania, and her parents moved her to Nashville when she was a teenager. I don't know anything about any of that other than that her parents were wealthy and, they moved her to Nashville to be a singer-songwriter, and she's brilliant. I mean, she's a great songwriter and producer. I will not deny her that. I've recently become a Swiftie fan, so I can't.
Okay, so I'll meet you that Taylor Swift. Now raise you something else. Okay, I don't play poker, obviously. I was told I wouldn't be able to anyhow with my face. It's like I've been told don't ever try and play poker. It just will not go well for you. And so I took that advice to heart. But Madonna's father is actually from that little West Aliquippa.
Oh, funny.
And you know, she, of course, she was born in where was it, Chicago? I can't remember. I'm not really
I
that much
don't
of a fan.
remember.
But yeah, he and my father had actually played golf with him several times.
Oh, funny.
And
Who knew?
he, you know, really very humble man, never really talked about his daughter or anything else. They just played golf and had a good time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so kind of crazy.
They're just like us.
Yes, they are, except they have a lot more money.
Which makes them very much not like us.
Right, exactly. Well, I don't know if I could handle all that pressure. I really don't.
Well, I'd like
So,
to try.
yeah, right. If I couldn't handle it, I could hire somebody to help me
Exactly. And you'd
and
have the
get me
money
through
to
it.
do so. So there you
There
go.
you go.
I
Problem
one time
solved.
I said to a voice teacher one time, I said something about money in regards to entertainment, and he was like, you don't do this industry to get rich. And I was like, look, if I'm going to be depressed poor and depressed rich, I might as well be depressed rich. So
Yeah,
like let's get rid of this whole like let's be poor thing because we want to be in theater and the arts.
right.
Give me money. I will feel my feelings one way or another.
Okay, so now are you back in the theater or have you moved on to what are you doing now?
So I've kind of backed out. I kind of had anyway, right? Like
Uh-huh.
with shutdown and everything the year prior to that, I was producing a show that was touring, and we were kind of like getting some steam, and we're looking at some promising bookings for 2020, but then obviously that happened, and I was on this hamster wheel. And I remember right before shutdown happened, I could sense that something was going to happen to me, and I had mentioned to a couple people like, I'm not okay and I don't know how to get off this hamster wheel, someone help.
Right,
And everyone else was just as busy and stressed out, so of course no one did help, and who could blame them? But then shutdown happened, and that was the best
right.
thing that could have happened for me at that time. um Despite the fact that I've had COVID like 4 times.
Really?
Oh yeah, straight out the gate, and then several other times throughout the last couple of years. But the stop of that and everything shutting down and no one needing me or having me be anywhere, like that was, oh God, can I do that every year? It was
Oh,
just,
wow.
it was so healing and so great that I just could like sit down and not do anything. And that was kind of the first moment where I was like, I don't think this is healthy and I think I need to get out of this. But I continued to pursue it because, again, identity piece, that's who I was.
Right,
And that's who I had built myself into being, was like this theater person that was also a producer, that was like running
right,
around town, like man about town, doing all the things.
right.
And it just became very evident that that was not a healthy lifestyle for me to be living the way that I was living it. And so
Mhm.
really taking stock and reevaluating what I wanted. And the industry was acting a fool and the union was being ridiculous. And so I had kind of removed myself from it. Um, and then this past summer, I had booked the national tour of Chicago as Billy Flynn, which I was super excited about. And that was a
Mm,
fluke. That was the only thing I had submitted to
mm,
audition for in the last 2 years. And I really wanted it. I went and saw it on Broadway with Pamela Anderson, with my best friend from high school. She came up to visit and we decided to
mhm,
go. And I was like, I want that. And the
mhm.
notice went up and I booked it. And I was like, there we go. And right before we left for the tour, I was replaced like at the last minute. And, I didn't really get an explanation or any reasonings or anything like that. And the guy who replaced me is actually quite a good friend of mine. It wasn't anything he did. It was just kind of like happenstantial of how the cookie crumbled, as they say. But that kind of signified to me that, like, as much as I do love doing it, that it's not something I want to be a part of.
Mhm.
It's not something that really serves me. And
It's a tough life.
it is. And I did it for a really, really long time. And I was super
Mhm,
lucky. I worked a lot and I got to meet,
mhm,
I mean, all of the friends that I have now are from that,
mhm,
with some exceptions. And, I think right now, having that experience and having that redirection, my focus is just my job, which I love, and my
mhm,
book, which
mhm,
I will then turn into a TV show. And that's the focus, because then I
mhm,
still get to do all the things. I get to write, I get to produce, I get to perform, I get to sing and record and write songs. So
mhm.
it's literally all of my skill sets that I do in one place. It just
And
makes sense to me.
and to promote yourself and to promote your book. I am so excited about that. Turning it into a
Yeah.
TV movie. That's so awesome.
Yeah. I'm I have a lot of things in my head that I need to get like the visual stylized things kind of,
Right.
like the idea is that you know how in Little Shop of Horrors there's like the little plant. So there, I don't think as of right now, I think the plan is that we're never going to mention cancer. It's just going to be the plant, and the plant is going to be present throughout the whole thing. And it'll be obvious what's happening, but like the plant will just be
Kind of like in the backdrop or the background.
sometimes in the background, sometimes not. It'll depend on the
Mhm.
severity of the situation. Still toying around with ideas, but that's the thought at the
Mhm.
moment, what's in the script at the moment. So we'll see. I'm really excited to see how it goes.
So am I. Well, you know how to get a hold of me.
I will, trust me.
Oh, good. Yes.
Maybe we'll need a sword wielding black belt in some of the scenes. We'll see.
You never know.
I
Well,
don't.
it's really funny. I even did that with using like that kind of energy for some friends of mine. Like if someone was going through rough times or whatever, there was a woman up in the mountains who this great little cabin area we used to go and rent a cabin for the day or for a couple of days and go hiking, my husband and I. And she was going through breast cancer. And she had a great attitude and she was doing really well. And then she had what do they call it, not a relapse but a recurrence.
Mhm.
So she was going through treatment again. So we'd gone up to the mountains and it's like, oh my goodness, you cut your hair. And she says, well, go through chemo again. And I said, you know what? I said, what, Teresa, when I go back, down to Denver tomorrow, I said, I'm going to the dojo. Every single punch, every single hit, everything, a single kick, every throw, everything that I do is going to be for you, beating the hell out of that cancer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that warrior spirit and that warrior energy can be certainly transmitted.
It sure can. I mean, energy is transferable. So
Right.
I'm
The good
sure
and the bad. So,
yeah, well, but I'm sure she appreciated the the gesture.
yeah.
It's hard. It's a weird space to live in,
Yeah.
physically and in your head, of course, as well. I mean, it just, and I have such resistance to the word like fighting cancer or cancer survivor, even though I use it
Right.
all the time, and because it does
Right.
feel that way. But like I didn't, I don't perceive myself as having done anything but show up.
Right.
All the technical stuff, all the medical stuff, like that was just stuff that my doctors did. I
Right.
did everything in my power to sabotage myself in that. I was drunk through most of chemo. I was high through most of chemo. I like tried to like fuck my way to validation to feel pretty during chemo.
Uh-huh.
Like I went on vacations and swam in the ocean. I got a parasite. Like I did everything possible to make sure that I died. And yet,
Wow. Okay. Okay. Is this in the book too?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
all of it is there. I mean, like that's one of the things that I am really proud of in this book is, again, with the identity piece. Like I had such a hard
Right.
time growing up in Pennsylvania as a queer kid, and then also as a big guy. Like I'm 6'4"
Right.
now. I was like 5'5" in kindergarten. Like I was a monster. um
God.
so I was like the most giant kindergarten kid you've ever seen. But so there was a lot of really difficult things within my growing up experience that like really made me hide and made it very hard for me to be visible unless
Right.
I was in control of how I was visible. And so in writing this, I really wanted to be as fully transparent about everything as I possibly could. And I mean, I talk about like sex and cancer and how that is a thing, like whether you want it or not, there's a component of you, at least for me, that felt like I should do it because it felt normal. And it's like a thing that
Right.
would make me normal again. Um, and we all kind of like our all of our shit like comes out in different ways, right?
Right.
And then again, on the long list of things that you're not really told, as
Right.
far as like, functionality in
Mm.
the self pleasure department
Uh-huh.
isn't a thing. And there are two chapters in there that touch on that. that very literally touch on that. Um, on that. And
Oh my God. Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's because I just wanted it to be very like, raw and real. Like, this is what
Yeah.
happened. And even though there is a lot of like metaphor and a lot of heightened fantasy world and language around what happened, the crux of what happened is what happened,
Right.
and I kind of gloss it over and make it fun and pretty. But, at the end of the day, like, I'm a shit my pants at the gym, and I like gave myself a hemorrhoid from jerking off in the hospital. Like, it's like, these things that you don't think of that are going to happen, like, and then they do. And you're like, oh, this is just embarrassing for everyone involved.
Okay. So now that's a perfect segue for me to read the disclaimer on your book.
Yes, it is not for anyone who is probably 16 to 18 or younger. This is an adult book for sure.
But the disclaimer that I'm talking about is that if it's for your readers, your audience, you do not need to know or like musical theater to cry, laugh your way through the indecencies of the book.
Correct. It's not so stylized that you have to know musicals or Broadway to enjoy it. It's just another layer of enjoyment if you do in fact know
Uh-huh.
what and who I'm talking about and how that character fits into that slot.
Uh-huh.
But, other than that, it's just like a new character that you're meeting, but really the way that it's formatted is like, you start out in chapter 1 with Little Shop of Horrors. And like, if like we named my tumor Seymour, and that is a thing that happened when I was in Reno. A friend of mine and I went to this doctor's appointment, and I met him at a bar afterwards, and he was like, where were you? What happened? I was telling him, and I showed him,
Wow.
and Little Shop was playing on the TV in the bar.
Oh, jeez.
And he was like, that's really big. And I was like, I know. He's like, you should name it. It's like a twin. And so we named it Seymour because Little Shop was on the TV.
Oh my God.
So throughout the whole book, that's the name of the tumor. The tumor itself is a character. And so that they all kind of roll into, like Little Shop meets Rock of Ages meets like Cats meets all these other things. And so characters from those shows that carry on with me all end up together at the end. Like, do you know the movie Big Fish?
I do not.
His dad, like the guy's Norton, Ed Norton, I think it's Ed Norton. His dad in the show tells these big grand stories about all these people that he's met in his whole life, and he thinks he's lying. And then at the end, when he dies, they all show up at his funeral, and he
Oh.
sees all the characters that he was talking about, and he's like, oh, I get it. And that was kind of like the thought that I was having while I was writing, as these characters roll along to the end, where
Uh-huh.
it's like the big fish moment, and they're all just there.
Uh-huh. That reminds me of something I will not tell you right now. Maybe after we maybe after we stop recording. It's a really funny story about my uncle. But anyway, so Edward, how can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on social medias, of course.
Mhm.
Instagram and TikTok are my main ones, and it's just at Edward Miskie. I also do Twitter at the same Edward Miskie, and Facebook as well. But Twitter and TikTok and Instagram are my two mains. And then also like the book is on Barnes and Noble, it's on Amazon. If you're in Canada, it's Indigo. If you're in Australia, it's Booktopia. There's like, I think 30 or 40 different retailers that I'm on. So, and I promise there is an audiobook coming. I'm not done with it yet.
Got it. Okay, and of course, all of these links will be in the show notes, but I really like the guests to be able to tell them or to share that with the audience. So, what is the one thing you would like to leave with the audience?
The second that you inhaled, I knew you were going to ask that.
Sorry about that.
No, don't be. It's a thing that I feel like is a common ask, like during interviews and stuff like
Right.
that. And I'm never prepared, and I should know better by now. Because I don't want it to be the same on every single thing. So like, be interesting, Edward. What?
Wait a minute. You have been so interesting.
Oh, thank you.
It has been, this has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you. What do I leave the audience? what do I want to leave the audience? God damn it. I wish this wasn't so hard. Things I've said before have been like, be aware of who's around you and who is treating you the way that they're treating you, because those are your true friends.
Right.
Like that's one thing. I think the other one is to give yourself grace and be gentler with yourself. I was definitely in a place where I was not doing that, and it would have been helpful. So I can impress that upon myself. And I think the other one, actually, let's run with the theme of today. Deal with your shit, right? Like, go to therapy, find a coach, find someone who can help you, because evidently I need to do this again. After there's a whole chapter in the book about my therapist and how that didn't go very well, but it's I think it's a thing that we need to do. Like I've apparently been carrying this thing around with me for the last 10 years. And so I'm going to take my own advice and go figure that out. Figure all your stuff out. Like, face it, it's hard, it's ugly. Today was not nice when that happened, but like in the end, like I feel better. And like, don't we all just want to feel better?
Well, you look fantastic.
Well, thank you. It's because we match. It's your
Well, of course,
you're just saying that because we have the same turtleneck on.
Exactly. But not only that, but your energy, your enthusiasm, your positive attitude, your sense of humor is just absolutely delightful. I don't know how people go through life without laughing.
Do they? That would make me sad.
It's very sad to watch.
Oof. Okay. Well, then that's my other advice, people. Laugh. Have a chuckle. Have a giggle.
Laugh a lot.
Yes.
Edward, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been so much fun.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. It has been. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you as well. And do share this episode with your friends, your family, subscribe to the podcast. Do go to Edward's social media, go to his website, check it out. Do get his book. As soon as we sign off, I'm going to Amazon. So I already have one book in my cart. So now I'm going to have two. And just remember to deal with your stuff. It's not pretty. It's messy. It's ugly, but it's worth it. And if you need help, get it, because there's always somebody available to help you. And if you don't like them, find somebody else. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.